there is a light. There is a light that is within each of us, that is part of the light that is everything that exists. As you know, we came from the stars. And so there is a luminosity and a radiance that's within all of us. And it's at times like these that we have to access that light. It's in dark times that that light becomes even more important. If we want hope to survive, which we do in our world today, then there's some ways that we can bring our light forward and make a huge difference on everything, because we are truly interconnected with everything that exists in the world. So our world has been flipped upside down. Things that were as normal and simple, everyday things like going to the grocery store has become scary. For some people, it's become life-threatening. We are told that it's going to get worse before it gets better, and it's been getting pretty bad. This past week, we heard that 1,200 people died in one day from this virus. They are bringing out refrigerator trucks as makeshift morgues in New York to hold the bodies. So we are at a time when we went from the best employment numbers that we'd ever seen in the history of our country to 3 million reaching out for unemployment, to 6 million, to this week 10 million people around the country seeking unemployment insurance. And so we are seeing this escalate. Healthcare workers who are having to decide between living their calling and living what they have been trained to do and want to do to help people and protecting their own families. They're in an ethical, moral dilemma. And it is a difficult, difficult time. And what Michael Meade says is that in times of crisis, we either grow a bigger soul or we become a smaller person. And when he talks about soul, he's talking about a vitality that's at the center of our existence, an energy, a life force that is a part of who we are, that's been passed down throughout the generations, and that we have the ability to bring out in a time like this. For many of us, this past week was the time when the first person who we know or is related to someone who we know died of the COVID-19 virus. Pastor David Smith, our executive director of worship and choir leader, his father, Bishop Robert Earl Smith Sr., who has come to All Souls a number of times over the years, coming to visit David and his family, and he would always come to church at All Souls. And when he was there, I'd say, Bishop, come on forward and share a word with us, offer us a prayer, a blessing. And I did that the first time he came. And his words were so inspiring, and they were so heartfelt, and they were so appropriate to the moment that every time he came back, I was so glad to see him, and I invited him forward. So he has prayed with us and ministered to us in this community and to me. One time when he came, I asked him to come talk to me personally, and he prayed for me around some personal things that I was going through. And he's just a wonderful man who poured out his life for others, and yet at the moment of his dying, he was all alone. Of course, he would tell us, if he were here, I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by the Spirit, by God, who has been with me all of my life. And so he was a man of great faith, and so I know his faith carried him through that. But our hearts go out and our prayers to his family who couldn't be with him and hold his hands. He has wonderful children, all of whom are impacting our world in lots of positive ways. He has an incredible legacy, and he's a beloved person. And it's hard not to be able to gather and memorialize people's lives at times like this. So what I wanted to talk about is, how do we, in such times, bring our light forward and keep hope alive? And I was listening to a podcast by Michael Meade this week, and he went back to maybe the oldest or some of the oldest writings that we have, the Upanishads from India. And he found a story about the light and the darkness in dark times. In it, a king asked a sage, the wisest man around, by what light do people make their way in the world and live their lives and their callings and their gifts in the world? And the sage said, well, of course, by the light of the sun. And then the king said, yeah, but if the sun goes out, then what? And he said, well, then they do it by the light of the moon. And this continued. He said, yeah, but what if the moon goes out? And he said, well, then by the light of the stars. Yeah, but if the stars are out, he said, then people live by the light of a fire. If the fire goes out, then by the light of a candle. But if the candles go out, said the king, and the people are in darkness, then what? And the sage said, then we live by the light from within. Every one of us has a light from within, and Mead reminds us that it's at times like this, that light that's within each of us, which is part of everything in existence, when it awakens within us, it brings something alive in the whole world. And so as we let our light shine, we begin to transform the world and the people around us, and we ignite the light within them. And I've been seeing this happening all around us, even right in our own congregation. Nolan Ranza, who as a child grew up, his mother was a seamstress. She would sew all kinds of beautiful things, and as a child he'd sit at her feet. He learned how to sew and is quite good at it, but hasn't had a lot of opportunity to do it for a while, but has begun to sew masks, custom-made, beautiful cloth masks for people, and is giving them away to folks. And it's just a beautiful ministry, a mask ministry, if you can imagine it. And we've got people like Joe Nuri and John Boston and Libby Billings and others who are finding ways to make food and feed the homeless, those in our community who might not have other people to care for them, who might be quite vulnerable in a time like this, who are quite vulnerable, finding ways to care for them. It's beautiful to see how they're keeping themselves safe and other people safe while also doing this good work. Members of our congregation have volunteered to call other members so that we're calling each other, and people are checking in on one another and finding out what their needs are and making sure they know how to get in touch with the community and the ministers. Reverend Barbara Prose, a couple of weeks ago, when this all began, did a chapel service with Rick Fortner, and they talked about building altars for at home. Since we can't be in church, how can we create an altar, a sacred space in our homes during this time? Well, Nicole Ogundari and Nolan again, they have taken this idea to a whole new level. They've each made altars within their own homes, and there's each one on those altars, they have pictures of beloved family members, friends, members of our community who have died. They have they represent things that they are missing, or that are being lost, or that could get lost if we don't remember them. Each of them have an adult daughter who had a birthday last week, couldn't celebrate in the ways that they wanted to with family, with friends, going out. They don't want those special moments in our lives to get lost. Nicole's son, Nicholas, is in our 9th grade coming of age class. They weren't able to go on their trip to Boston, and so many elements of that program that are having to be adjusted at this time. So they put these things in this altar, and then they came to me and to Barbara and to the rest of the staff and said, hey, would it be okay if we create an altar at the church that we can invite members of our congregation to send in email, pictures, and other things that they want to have included in the altar, things that people or things or events that they're missing that they want to make sure don't get forgotten in this time. And so they've started to build this altar in the foyer at the church, and they're inviting all of us to send them, again, pictures or other things. So they've written about it, and it's on our Beyond Belief blog, on our website. It'll be posted, a link on our Facebook page. So you can find out how you can help us to build this altar so that when we come back to church, whether it's in 4 weeks or a couple of months or whenever it is, that we'll come back and this altar will be there in our foyer to remind us of how we came together in this time. It's a beautiful vision, and it's one of the ways that we bring our light, our vitality, our creativity, our luminosity alive in this time, and help to bring it alive in our world. That is how we will keep hope alive, and that is how we are doing it. And I know we'll get through this, and we'll get through it together, and there's so many other ways, and I can't wait to see what other things we come up with to help give us a guiding light through these dark times.
If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to pray on, pray on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to pray on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we've got to work on, work on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we've got to work on, work on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we've got to move on, move on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we've got to move on, move on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we've got to march on, march on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we've got to march on, march on.
Good morning. I want to introduce you to Sanjit Bunker Roy, who was born in India and was educated in some of the country's top institutions. He was gifted with a bright intellect and was destined for a prestigious career as a lawyer or a doctor because his mother had big, big dreams for him. However, when he was a teenager in 1965, a famine broke out in one of the poorest provinces in India, and Bunker went to see for himself what was happening there. When he returned home, he packed his bags and he told his mother that he was moving to the village. When she asked him what he was planning to do there, he said he was just going to work as a laborer digging wells. Bunker said that his mother almost went into a coma. She refused to talk to him for years. And friends of her would tell her that he was just being an idealistic teenager, that soon enough he would become disillusioned with the world and he would come home, but he didn't. After years of digging wells, Bunker started noticing that the men in the village would get their education and then they would leave for the big cities and never return and never invested in the village. So he had an idea. He decided to educate young grandmothers between the ages of 35 and 50 who had more free time than younger mothers. Even though these grandmothers were illiterate, he wanted to train them to become solar engineers. And he did just that. Although at first he was laughed at and criticized, but he persevered, and soon enough he was training hundreds of women who were able to provide solar energy for their villages across India and Africa. Eventually, he started the Barefoot College, which has trained over 3 million people in skills ranging from solar engineering to teaching to architecture. Roy, who is now 74 years old, has been able to harness the skills of communities across the world and empower women to become agents of sustainable change within their communities. Where did that impulse come from? For young Bunker Roy. He was just a teenager when he felt that impulse to help. What made him give up his future, his bright future, in order to move to a village and dig wells? Altruism. Altruism is a benevolence that is present in most human beings, that make us delight in the happiness of others, that make us invest in the well-being of others. Altruism is a devotion to the welfare of human beings as well as other sentient beings. Stories of altruism, such as the one of Bunker Roy, are not very common, but that doesn't mean that the impulse is not there. That doesn't mean that we human beings don't have that altruistic nature in us. In fact, we do. For years in Western culture, we have heard messages such as, man is wolf to man, or I have found little that is good about human beings on the whole. In my experience, most of them are trash. Ouch. Fortunately, in spite of those messages, and in spite of some of our history of violence, there is so much more to us than that. In a recent book by Nicholas Christakis, who is the Sterling Professor of Social and Natural Sciences at Yale University, he says that for far too long, for way too long, philosophers and scientists have focused on the dark side of our humanity. But now, drawing on decades of research in social science, in evolutionary biology, in genetics, and in neuroscience, he explains in his book how and why evolution put us on a humane path. He shows that in spite of our history, we are wired for goodness and for collaboration. Of course, the natural and historical forces that shape our personality are powerful and they are important. But he says he's interested in forces that have been operating for much longer periods of time than just our culture. Much more powerful evolutionary forces that move through us, which propel us towards goodness, towards love, and towards collaboration. Yes, we certainly have an astounding capacity for aggression, for prejudice, and self-interest. And let us not forget, we cannot ignore the also primal forces within ourselves that make us gather into groups where some can come in and others must stay out, making it easier for us to be altruistic towards those in our group, but much harder to extend our kindness and our compassion to others outside the group. But altruism really is part of our nature. Researcher Alison Gopnik, who teaches philosophy and psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, has always been fascinated with babies. Early in her life, she would read philosophers who were trying to understand the nature of human beings, and she was like, why don't we look at babies? They can teach us a lot, instead of thinking that they are born as a blank slate. In her cognitive science lab at the University of California, Berkeley, as a philosopher and a psychologist, Gopnik is working on just that, learning from toddlers and babies. Altruism comes naturally for kids. A large study in the 80s placed a mother along with her toddler in a room when a stranger comes in needing help. If you drop something in front of a 2-year-old, she is likely to pick it up for you. If you can't get into a cabinet because your hands are full with books, you can count on the toddler to wander over and open the door without being asked. What we're learning is that while the term survival of the fittest has been used and abused for decades, we see now that it's more about the survival of the friendliest, because we have been able to survive because of our capacity to love, to cooperate, to share knowledge, and to have empathy for the pain and the struggle of others. When the news of the COVID-19 pandemic first came out, yes, some people started hoarding. But also the world started cooperating, sharing information and resources on how to contain the virus and protect human lives. Across the United States, people started sewing face masks for nurses in New York City. Musicians have been giving free concerts from their living rooms. Breweries started making hand sanitizers for us. We have seen so many acts of altruism. Here in Tulsa, this week, the Botanical Garden caught many of their 100,000 tulips and brought them to the hospitals for medical staff and patients to enjoy. And right here at All Souls, our building manager, Nolan, has been making masks for us. Here are the 2 that he made for me. I couldn't decide between the colorful one or the polka dot one, so he made me both. Also this week, an angel, a member of this congregation, contacted me because she was concerned about the undocumented workers in our community who can work now and won't be able to receive the benefit of unemployment and the stimulus package. She was worried about their well-being, so she donated a few $1,000s to help those families pay for basic necessities during these challenging times. Acts of altruism can be large or small. but they have a tremendous positive impact in our physical health, our well-being, and in society in general. I want to introduce you now to someone else I have been following for a few years. This is Matteo Ricard, a Tibetan Buddhist monk who has been called the world's happiest man. Ricard was born in France, but he has spent most of his life in monasteries in the mountains of northern India. In the early 2000s, he was invited to participate in a 12-year-long study in neuroscience at the University of Wisconsin, where they attached 256 sensors to his skull. And the researchers were shocked to see that when he meditated on compassion, his brain produced a large level of gamma waves that were off the charts, meaning that he had an abnormally large capacity for happiness and a low propensity towards negativity. In his book, Altruism, the Power of Compassion to Change Yourself and the World, he speaks of the benefits of altruism to improve our well-being and the well-being of the world. He also speaks of the importance of extending altruism, the necessity of spreading our loving kindness towards all beings inside and outside of our circle. He says that altruism is like rings in the water when you toss a pebble. At first, they are very small, then they get larger, and finally they embrace the entire surface of the ocean. Matteo and I and many of these researchers believe that altruism is the antidote to many of the social injustices we are experiencing in the world, caused by the selfishness of some at the expense of others. Altruism is also the cure for many of the issues that trouble our soul, such as the lack of purpose that many of us are feeling. Now, there are many ways to cultivate altruism. One of them is practicing some kind of compassion meditation or loving kindness meditation. The same researchers found that meditating on compassion for just 20 minutes a day for 4 weeks can literally change our brain for the better. Because of neuroplasticity, the repetition of something over and over and over can create patterns in the brain, and after that, it almost becomes automatic. At first, it feels like an impossible task, but thanks to this neuroplasticity, it becomes second nature. This is the case too for compassion and for altruism. We practice it until it becomes our second nature. And the more we practice it, the more we expand in our capacity for joy. Altruism might be the surest path to feeling better when we are down, because kindness makes us happy and happiness makes us kind. It is a cycle that promotes lasting happiness and altruism. Another study, this one out of Harvard University, conducted in the 1980s, proved that people simply watching an altruistic act, in this case, a short film of Mother Teresa tending orphans in Calcutta, that simple act of seeing an altruistic act would boost their immune system. It's fascinating. Therefore, while competition, individualism, and selfishness are at the root of many of the social issues that afflict society today, altruism can be the antidote. Moving away from the smallness of the mentality of what's better for me to a more expansive and more generous way of thinking about what's better for the whole ecosystem. Shifting from thinking of the self to thinking of the whole is how we activate our innate gift of altruism, how we align with these evolutionary forces that are already running underneath the first surface. This is the blueprint that evolution has given us for creating happier and healthier individuals, as well as happier and healthier societies. And this is also our purpose, to do the work that leads to the betterment of humanity, to the flourishing of all. May we cultivate, activate, and expand our altruistic inheritance. May it be so.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Sing it with me. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, when I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, when I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, when I breathe in.
Hey, we're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed.
And be a blessing.